I want to offer you a tool to supplement what you already read in the day's post and what we've been talking about. So we've been talking about, first of all, making sure that you're doing skills-based instruction, which is what's going to get you the most proficiency of your learner. You're going to see them talking the most. You're going to see them talking the best, meaning their language is going to be the most correct. It's going to make the most sense. It's going to be the most effective if they are going through lessons that are based on communicative skills. This isn't a training, to my great frustration. This isn't a training that is given to very many language teachers. I used to be a director, chair of national programs for training language teachers in 50 states. I did research on programs all across the US and outside, and I have studied myself in the UK and France, looking for programs that actually equip language teachers with the scientific skills that will make them effective at creating fluent students. And boy, is it rare. It is so rare, and I find that unacceptable. And stay tuned for many more rants about that. So I'm building it. Here it is. So it's okay if you're hearing this and you're being like, what? Not familiar with this. Or if you say, well, that was mentioned, but that doesn't really look like the curriculum that I'm using. Those are all typical scenarios. So I am going to offer you as many tools as I can and invite you into really pushing your teaching into the skills-based format as much as you can. That is probably going to be a gradual process of adjusting things and removing maybe things that you're used to doing that you find don't align. It is a transformative process. It's transformative not only of our methods, but of our whole classroom culture and ultimately of ourselves. I have to say that transforming our teaching to be truly student driven and to be truly based on the emotional and cognitive human needs of our learners ends up being a pretty deep transformation for us as people. It involves a lot of emotional work on our part, I think, because most of us weren't raised in environments that cared about or centered our human needs. And most of us have lived a lot of our lives in environments that were basically telling us that something was wrong with us if the environment didn't work for us, if we didn't reach our goal. But actually, I'm here to tell you that the typical language classroom doesn't work for anybody. The students who actually come out fluent from a high school language program, remember we just said that you can achieve that fluency in 2 years. The students who actually come out without going abroad from a high school language program after their 2 years of instruction are how you already know how many. Is it working? We tell ourselves a lot of stories about it can't work. Not true. In our courses, everybody can get there. Okay? So we can do this. We can get awesome results, but not by using the methods that most programs have been using up until this point, because those are not scientifically based and they just plain old don't work. We won't go into a lot of research about that. If you are interested though, we can share like lots of different like studies and things like that that you might want to look into if you have that kind of a mind that you want to look at qualitative and quantitative studies that have been done. And if you'd be interested in participating or co-creating any of those, that's something that I am working on in the coming year. So let me know if you'd like to collaborate about that, because it would be great to actually add to that body of research. But for the moment, take a week and try some things and see if they work for you. Just try them, really try them, and see if they work. And the first is to make sure that we are doing skills-based teaching by identifying the communicative skills that we want our students to have. And then, as I said in the text that you saw, I don't know what skills you should target for your students. Only you know that. And to be honest, there isn't one right answer. You're going to choose something that makes sense for your students, that you think will be effective for your students. but there are a lot of variables and there are a lot of right answers. So I'm not here to say this is the only one right way. What I can help with is, does that make sense? Does that look like it's going to be effective given what we know about how humans learn languages? One of the biggest questions that comes up when we tell teachers that language teaching needs to be skills based, that we need to move away from standing up in front of the class and talking about language, which may or may not be something you enjoy, but does not lead to any real proficiency for the students. And then instead, we need to approach language teaching a lot more like sports coaching or even job apprenticeship, in that it needs to be skills that are physically practiced and therefore honed and developed through lived experiences. And then that's what produces proficiency. One of the first questions that teachers have is, well, what are communicative skills? What do you mean? And most teachers have an idea already that we might be talking about something like grammar, right? Past tense, imperfect, plurals. They might have this idea of, oh, okay, it's like grammar skills. That's in it, but that's not it, if that makes sense. That's in it, and they're going to acquire grammar through this type of teaching, but we're not necessarily going to just take a grammar of a language, a book that's a grammar of a language, and then just teach the different parts of it, because like we just said, telling students about a language does result in the students knowing about the language. It does. Knowing about a language is not being able to speak and communicate in a language and use it in context. And I have been through both types of language teaching many times for myself with different languages that I have learned. And I can tell you, it is a night and day difference between being coached on how to use a language, learning to use it, practicing the skills, versus being told about a language and just sitting there and thinking, how am I going to turn this into something I can use in the wild? So we are shifting. We are profoundly shifting, but that needs to be concrete for teachers. What are the language skills? So I've been building something for years, and I actually am looking forward to professionalizing this a little bit and publishing a nicer version of this. So stay tuned. But it is very usable right now, and we do have some collaborations from teachers around the world. So you'll see annotations, which are incomplete but in progress, to give you some ideas. And you are also welcome to make annotations to this if you're willing to help out. So what I have is what's called a Trello board. So again, this will probably evolve and get moved to a different service. I'm not loving the ethics of this company anymore. So even though this is, I'm currently using the free plan, I'll probably move to a different platform. But on this site called Trello.com, I have built a board here that I'm giving you a link to. When I say a board, in order to understand how the Trello is structured, you need to throw your mind back to like late 80s, early 90s, and remember the cork board, one of the great technologies of mankind, the cork board. So when you would organize information on the cork board, so picture the meme with the guy with the string, and he's like hair standing on end and he's telling you about his conspiracy. If you can just picture him, he's using a cork board, right? And so what you do is you take push pins and you connect index cards to the cork board. And the index cards are holding the data that you want to present. And the index cards usually have a front side and a back side. So like the main ideas are on the front and the details are on the back, and then they're pinned to the corkboard, and then they're arranged on the corkboard in the way that makes sense for you. This is a virtual corkboard. Okay, that's what Trello is. I really love this. I also make very similar things on Padlet. It's not quite as cool looking. But just so you understand how to use this, so if you watch my mouse going over it, you see that these move and these can be like selected. I have edit access, so yours will look a little bit different. But the important thing to note is that you can scroll. Not only can you scroll, but you can click and open the card, basically flip to the back of the card, you will see there is additional information on the back here. And you can see that we've been working on this for 7+ years now. And this is how you get the information off of this Trello board. So I'll be sharing the link for you, and I encourage you to use it. Some notes about how to use it before I explain what's in it. You see how this card says in big letters, read this card before using this site. Please read this card before using this site. It tells you some key information. One of the key points that it tells you is that you, as a language teacher, are going to start and mostly stay over here in this column called actional competence. All of these columns are valuable and they do all have information, but language teachers have a tendency to live over here. They want to teach parts of speech. They want to teach derivational processes. They want to teach segmental phonology. They want to teach orthography. They want to teach reciprocal verbs, possession classes, indirect objects. That is what is usually focused on in grammar and grammar translation method teaching, which doesn't work. So, fight the urge to go over here and grab a linguistic term and say, I'm going to teach about this today. That the way you know you're going wrong is that you hear yourself say the word about. I'm going to teach the students about, huh, stop. We've been talking about, huh, stop. They know about, today's lesson is about. The minute you hear yourself say the word about, you're on the wrong track. We're not learning about things. We're learning to do them. To do them. Think about learning to be a plumber. Think about learning to be a gardener. Think about learning to be a dancer. Think about learning to be a mechanic. Things that are, skill sets, embodied skill sets that you use in a lived physical situation, okay? It's no good for us to spend a lot of time talking about replacing a battery in a car. Way better use of time for me to just show you how to replace a battery and then we do it together and then you try it. It's not a great use of time for me to teach about the pirouette. Way better use of time for me to just show you the pirouette, then we practice it together in stages and then you try some pirouettes. This is how we develop skills. Okay? So the about is leading us in the wrong direction. Instead, we're going to think about we're teaching people to do things. And this is why I say think like a coach. We're not going to talk about free throws. We're going to learn to do free throws. Skills-based teaching. This is what produces actual proficiency in languages because passing a test where you've retained all of the facts you were told about something is not our real goal in language classes. Our real goal is that you're in the supermarket and somebody comes around the corner unexpectedly and starts engaging you in conversation and you can use your skills. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for real proficiency. So here are some components of real proficiency. Now, where does this information come from? You will find it in the cards here. This comes from a piece of research that I absolutely love that is so underrated. And what they did in this research was they asked the question, when someone is fluent in a language, what do they actually know? And they studied adults. So think about an adult who immigrated at the age of 20, let's say, and is now 50, right? And they can live their whole life. Let's say they moved from Russia to the US or from Thailand to the US, and they can navigate all parts of their life. They probably even, unfortunately, raise their children in English. Everything in their life happens in English. They can speak their first language, but they are totally completely proficient in English. Maybe they own a company, maybe they are the director of their department, whatever. This is a person who has the same, essentially the same English skills as you and I. Notice I'm not saying, look at me. I am not saying anything about their accent. Because although many language teachers may love to focus on accent, accent is entirely overemphasized in language teaching, and we need to move to a model where we care about accent only insofar as it interferes with our ability to communicate. If a person can communicate very clearly and everyone can understand them and everyone can interact with them, we're going to chill out on the accent thing, okay? Accent is the last of our list. We are worried about actual communication skills. So this is going to help us stay focused on that because accent ain't in here. There's some phonology and stuff in here. But sounding like you have no accent is not a proficiency goal. Being able to communicate successfully, which requires a clear pronunciation, is the proficiency goal. So, what else? A lot of people who are not trained in this would just think of accent as the definition of what's fluent, what's not fluent. But we know that that's not the case because someone can have a different type of pronunciation to us, even just because they're from New Zealand or something. They can have a different pronunciation to us and still be completely competent in the language, and we can communicate with them about anything at any level of complexity. And that person is fluent. That person is highly proficient, right? So these researchers did actual studies of people who have achieved what we hope our students will achieve. And they did an inventory of what do these people know in the language. Not what can they stand up and give a lecture about, but what can they actually do in this language? What are the skills that they actually have that taken together result in them being a fluent speaker of this language, second language that they learned. And they have broken them out for us, skill by skill by skill. That's a roadmap to what we want our students to be able to do. That's a roadmap to our goal for our students. That's a roadmap to fluency. So underrated. So I took their research and I turned it into this board that we can very easily use and access. And we've also been building on it a little bit. There are a few things that, depending on the culture, depending on the language, could be built on more. So let me show you what that looks like. Again, your life is going to begin and for a very long time stay over here in actional competence. Okay. So think about something relatively basic, like thanking people. Okay, I want you to see what's on the other side of this card. And now we've worked on this with a few languages. Not all the languages have representation here, but we've been working on that. So expressing and acknowledging gratitude, meaning thank you and you're welcome. Now we know, let's take the English examples. We understand that people say thanks, and the other person says you're welcome. Yes, we all know that. We're going to teach our students that. But it's also important to recognize that there are different ways to say thanks and acknowledge gratitude depending on how mature the speaker is, the formality and maybe the dialect of the setting, as well as depending on the sort of attitude, the sort of flavor that we want to put into what we're saying, the register that we want to use, right? So, for example, we can say thanks, and the person can say you're welcome. We understand this. This is going to work for most people, right? There's dialect differences, right? So there are in the UK, people often say cheers, which if you didn't know, as I didn't when I moved there, can mean thanks. And then there are other appropriate responses. There are multiple appropriate responses, as well as, when I'm speaking to, let's say, a customer service person on the phone, I would usually say something more like, thank you, you've been very helpful. I appreciate your help. Whereas if I'm writing maybe a note to a close friend, I might say something more like, how can I ever thank you enough for everything you've done for me? I really want to thank you for your support in this difficult time. There's all these different ways tailored to the situation, to who I am, to who they are, to the way I want to sound right now that are going to achieve the same thing. What that means is that there's essentially different levels of proficiency within this same skill. So for our novice learners, our beginners, getting through thank you and you're welcome is great. We're going to say, yeah, great. You can go forth and use that. But as they become more proficient, we want to expand that. And so we're going to learn new variations on that are tied to different contexts. Those contexts have there's a lot of different sides of what makes a context. Again, is it formal or informal? What exactly is the content that we're talking about? Like, for example, if it's a time of grief versus a happy event like a graduation, there's different thanks phrases that are going to come out. Different levels of complexity, and there might be cultural things. So English isn't the greatest example for this, but you will see other examples in depending on different cultures, where perhaps, using the I am grateful might be inappropriate, or I am grateful to you, might be sort of inappropriate. It might be better to say like, the actions taken are very generous, or I want to acknowledge the hospitality I've received here. Those kinds of like indirect ways of speaking might be more appropriate in certain situations in certain languages. So English doesn't embody all the examples of this. This is why we're working on spelling these out in different languages. You see examples here of, for example, saying in Dakhota, "What you did made me happy." Different formulation that would be used in some situations of thinking. So this is not a list of words that people need to learn, because that's not an effective way of teaching. This is not one size fits all. Check, you've learned. You can say thank you, so now you know all this. What this is a set of skills that people have and that they develop over time. So what I propose to you for your work today is to look through these skills using the zone of proximal development of your learners, and to choose a skill or two. And I would push you towards these more advanced ones. As you move down, you're going to see things that are a little more complicated. And to think about, for your learners, what does this skill look like? In your unit, what does this skill sound like? What are the phrases that are relevant to whatever activities you're currently doing? So I think about, here's an example of something that we don't do a ton of in the novice level, right? Um, there are lots of ways to put together a speculation and to respond to a speculation. Um, let's use English as the example. Here are some examples we thought of. My money says he comes back late. My money says, right? I'll bet. I'll bet he doesn't even get there. Box of donuts says we get paid early this week. Um, so these are different variations on the betting idea, meaning that it's a speculation. My best estimation, this is very professional. It removes the metaphor, so it's clearer for a mixed audience. My best estimation is that the deadline will end up being unrealistic. This is also very indirect. Um, a very indirect version of I don't think that's going to happen, or I don't think that's going to work. Here's a very thoughtful, very technical way of expressing this. It would be unusual, but not impossible, to see numbers increase in a market like that. Right? So this is speculating, predicting, and formal and informal contexts, as well as different levels of complexity, and it depends on the content that we're talking about. So what does the skill of predicting and speculating, or responding to predictions and speculation, look like within your unit, if it's relevant? You will lay out the sort of phrases that you would expect students to master and be able to use within your context along this skill. And then at the end of your unit, you'll be able to assess, are they able to express predictions and speculations? Are they able to respond to predictions and speculations? Are there phrases that they're employing the appropriate phrases for predicting and speculating for the communicative situations that we are in for the activity that we're doing right now? This probably is a shift from what you've been working on, but by choosing your goals based on skills that you want to develop in your students, you will start to think of phrases that they can learn that are going to give them a lot more to work with than word lists, which tend to be very noun heavy and tend to remove everything from context. We're going to keep the language in context, but we're going to target specific phrases that they're going to practice using until they really master their usage. So I really recommend you to choose a couple of target skills from this list. You will see others over here, but you'll see a lot of linguistic words. You'll see sort of more technical things. Again, let's get to that later once we've been using this for a while. This is really the most useful column. So for your task today, and to start out the process of planning lessons at the intermediate and advanced level that are really going to grow their communicative skills, choose a couple of those cards, those skills, and write out what that would sound like in the context you're working in. How would they be able to use this in the activities that you're thinking of doing? And choose the skills that you think are within reach. So they do know some of these words or phrases. So they're within reach, but they do push your students beyond where they currently are. So you'd like to see them grow this skill in the near future. And then you'll adapt what that skill looks like to your exact context. Once you've chosen some focal skills, we can work on how to actually convey those focal skills, and those are in the coming days. We can work on how to actually convey those skills through communicative lessons that really do work to see students master those and using them correctly, pronouncing them correctly, and really having an understanding of when to say which phrase. That's what we'll be working on going forward.